Angie Hodapp, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
We're excited to hear about the one-day MFA coming up June 22nd. We're going to run down all the details about this, what sounds like just a fabulous program that you're presenting with a couple others. You're getting a little support from a couple other folks as well. But before we dive into that wonderful day and learn all about what people can expect if they sign up. Let's just make sure we know who you are and where you work for. And what is a director of literary development?
I get that question a
Fill us
lot.
in.
Yeah. I work with Nelson Literary Agency. I've been with them since Valentine's Day 2011. So a minute.
A
And
minute.
a minute.
Couple of changes in the business since then.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I started out with them doing contracts, royalties audits, kind of the numbers part, the legal part. And I've shifted into and did several years ago, shifted into this new role of literary development. So what does that mean? It means I read a lot of queries. It means I read a lot of sample pages. It means I request a lot of full manuscripts, which I will then also read, or at least parts of. And then I'll write reader reports for the agents, recommend things that they should drop everything and read this now. So just kind of keeping the submissions wheels greased, keeping things coming in is one of the things I do. I also do full manuscript edits for our existing clients. So helping the agents, supporting the agents, getting things ready to go out on submission to editors. And also if we have a client, and writers out there might be surprised to hear that this happens, but sometimes writing can be very hard and it can be very challenging to come up with a new idea, or you have a seed for an idea and you don't really know how to turn that into a plot or where the story should go, or I'm 3/4 in and I'm stuck. And that's where I can kind of come in, brainstorm with our clients, help them come up with some new ideas, help them maybe tweak an idea they have for a particular audience. If it's not working for young adult, hey, maybe we can take this into the adult realm. What needs to happen? Just kind of that development piece is probably, I don't know, I like both sides of the job equally. Reading submissions, going to conferences. I'm going to Thriller Fest next week, by the way. Very exciting.
Nice.
Talking to writers, getting my finger on the pulse of what's out there, but then also really diving in and going deep with one manuscript. So it's kind of two brain levels that I get to play with in my day to day.
Yeah. Sounds like you do everything but actually pitch to the editors. You
Correct.
are that's the last thing that you just have chosen not, you just don't want to get into that.
Yeah, and several times over the years, I've kind of toyed with the idea, and Kristen Nelson, who owns the agency, has always been really open. Like, hey, if you ever want to be an agent, that's always a path you can take. I played with the idea several times, like maybe I'll take on some clients here and there, and it just hasn't ever felt like the right time. I'm just very happy with what I do. I also have a pretty active life outside of the literary world.
Yeah.
So, and I know that with agenting, you're giving up a lot of your what you think would be free time, a lot of weekends, a lot of evenings. It's not a 40-hour a week job. So I've been,
Yeah. Yep. Yep. For those who don't know, it might be just coming across Nelson Literary Agency for the first time. What do you all look for just in a general way? Is there anything you don't represent?
good question. So what we look for year over year does tend to change because we're always looking for what editors want to buy. Within that, right now, we're pretty active in women's fiction, and we're always looking for thrillers, though not anything more like police procedurals, or cozies, looking for darker, more literary, big character driven type stories in that space. Kristen is really looking for those big standalone book club fiction stories, you know, the hardcovers at the front of the bookstore when you walk in. And then I would say those are kind of our top three. We are open to some historicals, if it's the right fit for us. And then kind of moving away from young adult. That's not to say we
Mm,
wouldn't represent young adult. I just think it's always been such a saturated market, so it's harder to play in that sandbox. And then both Kristen and Joanna have moved away recently from middle grade. That was an area that we were repping pretty consistently, you know, 10 years ago or so, and now neither one of them is really interested in that space. We don't rep nonfiction at this point. We don't really rep romance. We're hearing a lot of editors in New York who are saying, you know, it's still a really tough space for that
yeah.
traditional track. A lot of those romance authors continue to self-publish and do really well. And so it takes a lot of time to get a book out there. Romance at this time isn't really, you know, a good return on that investment for us, but it's still a thriving genre, of course.
Mm,
And then recently, Joanna has taken on some poets. So we
mm,
represent Kate Baer, who's a New York, her, I think she has 3 collections out now, New York Times bestseller. Joyce Sullivan, Instructions for Traveling West, just came out about a month ago. And it's doing very, very well. Instant USA Today bestseller. So she never really thought I would be a, you know, that she, me speaking as her, she never thought, hey, I'd be a really great agent for poetry, but here she is, and she's making
wow.
space for these beautiful poets.
Wow. Wow. That is really interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, this sort of maybe will segue into the 1 day MFA thing, but um, it, I think just to underscore from all the things you see coming in over the transom, which would be the email these days, you must really have an eye, a feel for the importance of just the sheer writing quality right out of the chute. There's just something that you can probably recognize as something that is green light, yellow light, complete red light distinction that you can make in short order. Is it possible to describe what that is?
Oh, that that's a great question. I wish it had an easy answer. I can tell you it's subjective, and you know, from writers out there listening, and they've probably heard that word before, subjective. It's kind of an annoying word because it was
Yeah,
so much easier if we all agreed on what was good and what needed work still. So there's definitely a gut check that happens. I'll read
yeah,
something, and if I am immediately grabbed by the voice, I have questions about what's going to happen next. Um, those are the things that are going to keep just make me hit that request button right off the bat. Like even if it's just 1 or 2 pages, if I like your pitch, if I like the voice in those first couple of pages, yeah, give us the full manuscript. We want to at
yeah,
least read into it and see where it's going to go. Um, Voice is probably the number one thing that is hard to describe, but you know it when you see it.
yeah,
Uh, and that is one of the things we're gonna talk about on June 22nd at the
yeah,
education.
yeah. Well, yeah, and it's tricky, and just because you may not connect with opening chapter doesn't mean it's not going to connect with another agent. It's just so
Oh,
it's a
absolutely.
challenging. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
and we as a
yeah,
team don't even always agree. So, you know, we've got Joanna, we've got Kristen, and then Maria Heater is our part-time literary assistant, and she's going to be moving into agenting in a few months as well. And so we kind of bounce things off each other, like, hey, am I missing something here? Is this, you know, if I'm on the fence about something, it's always so great to just say, you know, can somebody else put some eyes on this and just tell me what they think.
Yeah.
And again, yeah, we don't always agree on what's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yep.
So,
And at the same time, I assume nothing much has changed in terms of the sheer volume of things you're asked to consider on a daily and weekly basis. So you're under a little bit of a crunch. You can't just sit and linger with a martini on every page and sort of let the moment kind of linger and slowly get into something. You've got to
yeah,
judge quickly. Yeah.
you've got to judge
Yeah.
quickly. That's absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get into June 22nd. What can folks expect? What that sounds ambitious. One day MFA. Well, give us. It's a great idea, a great title.
Yeah.
So we're gonna emerge with what?
So, that's a good question. I think my idea behind this workshop is twofold. One, I taught a master class for the RMFW Colorado Gold Conference. I want to say it was, I don't know, 2017 maybe. And it was called the MFA in half a day. So it was a 4-hour workshop. We did a lot of writing exercises. And we talked a lot in that about the sound of your writing, right? These are things that I think, because RMFW has for a long time anyway had a history of really fostering writers who are in the commercial fiction space or the genre fiction space, there hasn't been historically a lot of focus on, well, what does it mean to write in a more literary way, or to have,
Yeah,
and we think of these MFAs, which stands for Master of Fine Arts in creative writing. We don't often think of that as being useful, right? There can be a little division in how people think about commercial fiction, where the writing is very transparent to the story, right? It's about the plot, it's about the pacing, it's about excitement, keeping people reading and turning pages. Versus, oh, well, if you have an MFA, you're probably one of those like poetic literary writers who just gets lost in metaphor and purple prose, and it's boring, and maybe it's really pretty, but nothing's really, so there's these two views of these two different types of writing. And my premise is that commercial writers, the successful ones, write extremely well. And they're
yeah,
not, that's not happening by mistake
yeah,
or accidentally. They are writers who, yes, they can deliver plot and they can deliver the beats of their genre, but they have an ear to, and they make very conscious choices about words, about phrasing. Um, and those are the types of choices that I'm hoping to call attention to in the workshop. So, and I've taught MFA in half a day. I've taught versions of that for various organizations over the last several years. So I'm taking some of the content from that and adding it to the content that I prepared for the master class I just taught for RMFW last fall, which was voice and style. Very similar. And I kind of thought of voice and style as being part 2 of MFA in half a
yeah,
day. So when Vicky was like, hey, Angie, would you like to come do this education event? Immediately, I'm like, oh, this would be great. This opportunity to do all of that content in one day, with the opportunity to do some writing exercises. We will be pausing to put pen to paper a little bit, or fingers to keyboard. We will be reading some of our writing aloud, although I never require people to do that if that's not something they're comfortable doing. But there is that opportunity to share and workshop, and that is part of a traditional college, master's level MFA, is that workshopping and really trying to articulate to somebody else, how would you make this better? Or I see what you're doing, maybe try this. And there's this experimental place where people can support each other in their art. So we will be playing with that a little bit on that day as well. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but I am putting in some new things as well. So if you've taken the MFA, the half day MFA before, come expecting some different content for that part of the class. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it occurs to me that maybe subjective is the theme of the day here, because you talk about blending maybe some a little more literary, high-end PhD, MFA kind of imagery, metaphor, kind of just awareness of language and rhythm,
Mhm.
just really that ability to say, I understand language and I want to present it in the best way possible to tell my story. And then on the other end is what I guess I'll call just maybe a pulp thriller, the airport newsstand rack, where you're just expected to whip through the pages and have this journey. And really, you're not going to write down any words to look up in the dictionary, or
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not your mind is not going to be blown by some image that will make you stop and contemplate the history of the universe. It's just
Correct.
or the fate of mankind. But somewhere in there, blending them, it's just knowing where that line is between going overboard with the heaviness and the um, colorful purple prose, and also
Yep.
keeping the story moving. It's such a challenging thing to
It's a
do.
huge challenge. And I think you bring up a good point too, in that that line, that balance will be on a different place, I think, on the continuum for every writer, no matter their genre, but also for every genre. You look at, say, Tana French, and
Good
she's
example.
got a very we would call that more of an upmarket, on its way from commercial to literary.
Yep.
Her voice is very unique, and she indulges in some really beautiful language to tell a very traditional, very familiar type of story, a very genre police procedural type of story. Um, so there's a lot of room to play with voice and style and finding out who you are as a writer. Another thing that I think is kind of interesting, when I taught the voice and style class last fall, I put it out there at the beginning. I said, some of you are probably going to get to the end of this class today and realize you're writing in the wrong genre. And they kind of looked at me like, what? And sure enough, at the end of class, later in the weekend, I had one of my students in that class come up to me and say, um, I realized I'm writing the wrong genre. She realized she had been kind of trying to shoehorn her voice into a genre that really didn't jive. And she kind of in her heart of hearts wanted to write something else, didn't think she'd be successful in that. And so wasn't honoring that. And now she had her voice. Now she had a little bit more idea of who she was as a writer. That affects what you write as well.
Yeah. So a little self-exploration in this process, and
Yep.
just knowing where you're comfortable. Yeah. Well, Tana French is an interesting example, and I would say that her editors and publishers, for good reason, give her an extra, what would you say, 15 or 20,000 words per book, to
At least
let her linger in those moments and interiority, and letting her characters breathe at a different heart rate than some mystery novels do.
agreed.
Um, yeah.
Agreed. And
So,
the key there, I think, is giving that interiority conflict, right? It's not
yeah,
just navel gazing, it's
yeah,
like things going on inside those minds and those
you
characters.
bet. Yep, yep. Wow. So yeah, the whole one thing you touched on, I think, is really interesting, is RMFW itself and what it stands for in terms of this, and what you're teaching and the message that you're sending in terms of, I know you're not weighing in on whether all this wonderful new prose that we're going to learn how to write will ultimately manifest itself as independent publishing, or whether it will manifest itself as going for a traditional publishing deal. But it is encouraging. I think it's encouraging to say RMFW should stand for the highest quality prose that we can achieve as a group, or as at least make an opportunity for an individual who wants to go after a Tana French level of
Mhm.
execution in their work from every aspect, should be able to find that instruction within RMFW.
Yes, I agree. And I love, so I've been a member on and off, frankly, of RMFW since probably about 2001 or 2002. I've held several board positions. Like, I think it's so smart and it has such a great history of supporting, specifically having this really focused mission of we support writers who want to write genre or commercial fiction. That's what we do. I think it's changed, and that's a good thing. And I don't mean it as RMFW. I mean, all things are blurring right now and have
Mhm.
been for several years as far as, well, this must fit in a commercial fiction box. This must fit in a literary box. Um, Even length of works. You mentioned Tana French having really big word counts in her books, but also novellas. You know, we've got big
Yep.
five publishers who are buying novellas all of a sudden. Graphic novel. I can't remember. I just saw recently within the last one of the big five publishers is starting a graphic or has already started a graphic novel imprint. Like
Yeah.
that's a brief storytelling modality. So I think
Right.
to say that a certain style belongs in a certain box doesn't, it's not valid anymore. um
There you go.
and we have a lot of commercial fiction writers who have taken cues from script writing, and that is so useful for structure. Save the Cat, right? The 13 point or 15 point
Yep.
beat sheet from Blake Snyder. um and I think that's very useful because there's a lot of writers out there who can write very beautifully, gorgeous, gorgeous writing, zero plot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's writers who can deliver a beat by beat story that's flat as a board. And so I think, and I see both in the slush pile day after day after day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm
Yep.
hoping that this workshop will provide that opportunity. Like every fiction writer, no matter the length of the story you're trying to tell, should take a screenwriting class to learn structure and pacing and beginnings and middles and ends and, you know, tying things back to where they began. And they should take a poetry class to just learn the beauty of language. If you have both of those things, you're gonna be head and shoulders above a lot of folks in the field.
Yeah. Great. Wow. Um, you're going to have some help on June 22nd. You're going to have some
Yes.
additional support crew.
Oh,
Uh,
so excited.
Chelsea, and I'm not sure how to pronounce Chelsea's last
Emil
name.
Haynes from Cops Literary. Um, Chelsea's amazing. And I have such deep respect for Elizabeth Cops, who together they're Cops Literary and just fantastic women. Um, and then of course Bernadette.
Bernadette. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, I love her. She and I road tripped
Yeah.
up to the Wyoming conference last summer.
Oh, great.
We had such a blast.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And they are going to be doing some consulting
Yep.
one-on-one things
Yep.
with folks.
Yep. So writers who come are going to have this opportunity to sit down with some industry professionals here and get some guidance, ask some questions, get them a step forward from wherever they are toward where they're going. And I think that's so great.
Yep. Excellent. Well, full details at rmfw.org. Registration is now open. It's a little over a month away as we chat here today on May 17th, but I'm sure you'll have a big group. Is there a limit on the space or?
That's a good question. I
Yeah,
don't think so. I mean, it's at the same
yeah,
hotel where we hold conference, and they've been
yeah,
a great space. So,
yeah,
uh, but yeah, and I want to I want to pack pack it.
yeah, yeah,
So come and bring your friends, and it's my goal is to just create a very safe, nurturing space to explore,
yeah.
while
Good
also
deal.
providing a lot of really concrete tools, right? That writers can use. So hopefully I achieve that.
Do people at the end of the day get a little cap and gown and a ceremony and walk across the stage and a diploma?
I did diplomas at RMFW the
Ah,
first time I taught
okay.
that class.
That's great.
We had little certificates at the end of class.
That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. As we wrap up, we always, and since you read so much all the time, what you have to recommend in terms of a book or an author? I'm really intrigued.
Yeah.
What's piqued your interest these days?
Oh my gosh. So I recently finished I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca, I want to say Mackay, Makkai. I have some questions for you. It's really, really voicey. It's twisty. It's very deep character development. It asks a lot of questions that keep you completely invested in the outcome all the way to the end. Such a great book.
Great. Yeah, I see that around and recommend it a lot, but I haven't picked it up yet. It
Yeah.
sounds interesting. Very good. Angie, thank you so much. Thanks for all you do for RMFW and have a great one-day event. Are you going to be at Colorado Gold in
I
September?
am. I am. I'm going to
Okay.
teach the prequel on Thursday. So I'll be there. And then
Okay.
throughout the weekend, I'll also be taking pitches for NLA. And I believe I'm also going to do a roundtable.
Okay.
So I think 8 or 10 writers. I volunteered to do that. I hope they take me up on it.
Yeah. Excellent. Angie, you take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mark. Great to talk to you.